Hi, I'm Josh Myers. I love being inspired by anything from movies, literature, art, anything that grabs my attention and that wants me to create as well. So I've decided to do a series of interviews, interviewing people who inspires me, where I draw my inspiration from. And today I'm here interviewing David Uerkvitz. David is an award-winning author, a music professor, and an acclaimed concert pianist. Hi, David.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome. I'm so glad you're here to share with our viewers your extraordinary life.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit. Let's just give our viewers a background of you. Tell us, where were you born?
I was born in Oklahoma City.
Right, and as you told me before, on a farm, right? You grew up on a farm. You were raised on a farm.
Yeah, I was born in the hospital, but I grew up
Sure.
on the farm. We moved back to the farm when I was 4 years old.
Tell us a little bit about life on the farm in those days.
It was rough
Was it?
because it was during the Depression. So it really was rough.
What kind of farm was it? Was it?
It was a general quarter of a section
I see.
farm. My father grew wheat and corn
Oh, I see,
and
I see.
cotton, and we raised chickens and cows and milked the cows. And
Right. What were your chores as a child on the farm?
fortunately, they didn't demand a lot from me. They didn't expect much from me, I guess. I had to feed the chickens and collect the eggs and sometimes chop wood, but not
Okay.
very often.
Right.
And milking the cows was the awfulest chore. I hated milking.
Sure, sure. So where on the farm, and you're doing all these chores, and it's rough, and I mean the weather, and we know the weather is pretty rough in Oklahoma. So where does because you achieved so much music-wise in your life, how did you fall in love with music while growing up on a farm?
Well, actually, I wasn't on the farm the first 4 years of my life because my family had moved to the college town
Right.
to put my sister, who was 20 years older than
Sure,
I,
sure.
put her through university, and she was studying piano. And so when she'd practice, I'd sit up at the top end of the piano and fiddle around. And my mother said, "Oh, don't do that, don't bother your sister." And she said, "Oh, that's all right, let him do it." And I just fiddled around and enjoyed it a lot, but that had an influence on me. And when I went to the farm, I just fooled around on it, but didn't show much talent, exceptional
Right.
talent of playing by ear or anything like that. I did listen to the Metropolitan Opera of the Air on a
What's
radio
that?
that we had.
Oh, on the
Every
radio.
Saturday afternoon, they had Metropolitan operas. And as long as we could afford to keep that radio, I listened to that. But after a while, they had to take the radio back. So I missed that. But I do remember that I heard an opera by Wagner. And I asked what language they were singing, and they said German. And I heard from Lohengrin the music. And that music would keep going through my mind at night after I'd go to sleep. And I think that was when I fell in love with the music.
David, that was amazing. Please tell us, what's this piece called?
This is a sonata by Padre Antonio Soler.
Ooh.
He was born in 1782 and was a monk in a monastery, El Escorial Monastery in Madrid, which I had the opportunity to visit. It's a huge place, a little bit austere, and you'd be surprised at the joyful, exuberant music that he could bring out of a monastery like that.
From that austerity.
From that austerity, yes. And it has a kind of a joie de vivre to it that you wouldn't expect from a Spanish monk.
Right.
But apparently that place was a cultural center with artists and teachers, and he had studied with Scarlatti, the famous Italian pianist that was at the court there, and he actually taught the Infante, the prince. And he wrote 550 of these sonatas. This was a sonata in F sharp major. And he was known for his modulations, that is, the way that he changed from one key to the other, which makes everything kind of like a surprise around every corner, because he didn't follow the traditional way of modulating. And he developed his own theory of modulation and wrote a treatise on it, and nobody understood it. And nobody's ever been able to figure out what he meant. There's a Spanish saying that says, de genio, de músico y de loco.
And
Todos tenemos un poco.
Please tell me what that means.
That means of the genius, of the musician, and insanity, we all have a little bit.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
And apparently he was maybe just a little bit insane, but it also could become just his own expression of how he wanted the music to be played.
Of celebrating that little bit of insanity within us all, right? Instead of suppressing it, like celebrating it.
Instead of being too highly educated in what to do when.
Right.
And some of our greatest musicians are like that. Berlioz, for example, was not trained as a musician. He was a doctor. And so it gives his music some surprisingly wonderful moments. And in this, I felt exuberance, I felt joy, I felt pathos, I felt moments of tenderness, and I think he expressed all of that in just one short piece.
You mentioned him and Berlioz. My question, you will probably kill me for this question, I think any musician will. What is your most favorite composer, first to play and then secondly to listen to?
My actually overall composer, the composition that I enjoy the most listening to and have enjoyed playing, is Nights in the Gardens of Spain by De Falla.
Wonderful. And you had you did a performance based on that, didn't you, here in Taiwan?
Yes, with two former students, yes.
And how did that go?
To me, it was fantastic.
Right.
It was not perfect,
Sure.
and that's something that
I think
musician always strives
to. Never satisfied with the end
never
result.
ever really satisfied.
Always striving for perfection.
Always striving for perfection. But it was just admittedly enjoyable performance to have two of my students there doing the orchestral part, and they were with it. And I call it Nights in the Gardens of Pain, because you have black key glissandos that really hurt unless you're conditioned for them. But to me, it shows the depth of feeling. The Spanish composers had dance in their blood and the guitar in their blood. One of the Romero guitarists, the Romero brothers, told me that when you play Spanish music on the piano, it's like playing a giant guitar.
Wow.
And I think that that's probably true. There's dance, and there's the guitar, and there's pathos, which we didn't have much chance in that piece to study. But most of your pieces have the canto hondo, the deep song in the middle. And I think that that piece is just, to me, the most enjoyable thing. I heard it the other day, and I thought, that's just got to be one of the greatest pieces ever written. And that is strange to say because it's out of the field of general public listening.
Right, it's not something that's commonly known. And I, for one, will go today and listen to it because I'm curious now of
I hope so.
how it sounds.
But of course, if I were to be sent to a desert island with one person's music to study,
Yes.
I would take the works of Bach.
Oh.
To me, Bach is the ultimate in balance between intellectual and musicianship, between the intellectual and the music.
Right.
Because he was such a great thinker that he was just reached the height of his time, and he was limited only by his time and by his instruments. And who knows what he could have done with today's instrument and in today's intellectual climate.
Right. We certainly need more people like him these days, I feel.
Oh,
in the music
he wrote
world.
15 pages of music every day.
Well, that's incredible.
It is incredible. You see it on the shelves, and it's like that of his music. And that was what was left over after the students went up to his studio and wrapped their lunches in his manuscripts
You're kidding.
after he died. He was in such ill repute at the time. Yes.
Oh, that's
And
fascinating.
if I had to take two, I would probably take Bach and Rachmaninoff for the emotional content,
I see.
the romantic. And number three, Chopin just for beauty.
There you go. I think that's a well-balanced package. Have you ever composed any music?
Oh yes,
Oh, you have.
oh yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
I enjoy composing a lot,
Really?
and there's nothing that I hate worse than writing a good manuscript. so there's a dichotomy there. But I wrote a concerto one time,
Yes.
and when I performed it, my students were enthusiastic about it, and my children were enthusiastic about it. And my mother said that she went to bed for 3 days, that it nearly killed her, and that she could see all the devils of hell coming out of that piano. Because it was so dissonant. And
Oh, really?
rhythmic. Yeah. And then and it's based on a rhythmic basis of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, 3, 2, 1. And someone told me that Gershwin said that his ideas all came through the rhythm, which
Yes.
was the inspiration for this. And there is one of my pieces on the record.
Well, that's great. You speak of inspiration, of what inspired Gershwin. What inspires you?
Well, it comes to me rhythmically.
Rhythmically,
also.
like the same as Gershwin.
Yeah.
Right. But what sparks it? What sets it off? Is it do you hear something or you hear sounds?
I think so, and then of course you have to experiment with it to see actually what it comes
Right.
out.
Right.
But yeah, I wrote one piece that's on the record. It's called Etude in Distance, and it's a distance between the notes from high and low, and the dissonance and the consonants, and the distance in time with the rhythm, like this. And, I enjoy the dissonance. I enjoy the bitterness
Oh, I
of
see.
dissonance.
Right. So you've been playing music, creating music for most of your life. What keeps you going? Because you mentioned to me before, preparing for a concert takes a lot out of you, emotionally, spiritually, physically. What keeps you going? What keeps you keep making music?
Well, actually, I don't keep making music much anymore. For one thing, old age has brought visual problems, and so the lines and spaces and stems and things are kind of crooked, which makes it very difficult to read for doing new music. So, like the Salieri, I just brought it out of my subconscious because I couldn't find the music.
I see.
And so I just played it like I remembered it.
Right.
So I don't do much performing anymore.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to come out the top contestant in the senior citizens category
Right.
in a tape contest and invited to New York to perform. And they invited me to come back every year to give a performance.
That's fantastic.
And I told the president of the society, I said, for my 75th birthday, I would like to play in Carnegie Hall. And she said, well, why wait for your 75th? Just do it. And it's not the big concert hall. It'd be ridiculous for me to try to get an audience that large. But I did play in the Wild Hall, which is the recital hall, which was a wonderful experience to get to do, and one with a former student that was studying in London at the time. And we got together and did a 2-piano performance. It had some Spanish music in it, of course.
Yeah, of course,
and,
of course.
And to good critical acclaim. So
Great.
that was nice, and a very enthusiastic, packed audience. It was just, New York audiences are so warm.
Fantastic. And would you say that's one of the highlights of your performing career?
Well, of course.
Yeah. Are there any others?
It's the Mecca.
It's the Mecca. It's the Mecca. I think what I want to ask is if you have any other highlights throughout. You've mentioned you perform not only in the States but in other countries as well. I mean, Taiwan for one, but also other places.
Well, I performed in Latin America, the Caribbean, Europe, Asia. One performance does stand out. I was in La Paz, Bolivia, at 13,000 feet, and was performing in the university on a wonderful piano that had been a gift of the U.S. government. And the air was pretty thin, and I was doing the Chopin scherzo. And I thought, boy, this is going really well, but I'd better hold back because I might pass out. And I thought, no, I'm not going to hold back. I'm just going to give it all I've got and do it as well as I can.
There you go.
And I did, and I didn't pass out. But later I was told that there was a line of communists in the back of the auditorium that were going to demonstrate because I was an American. And instead they came, sat down and listened to Chopin.
And enjoyed the music.
Through the savage beast.
Yeah. That's amazing. The power of music right there.
Yeah, and once I did a performance with the El Salvador Symphony, the Rachmaninoff First Concerto, and there was a driver. He said, now don't go anywhere without me. I want to take you wherever you want to go. After the performance, he said, I'm not really your driver. I'm your bodyguard. And that was the week that the El Salvador Revolution broke out. We heard firecrackers on the way out. We found out they were not firecrackers.
Wow. Wow.
Just barely made that one.
Well, that's exactly the reason why I'm doing this interview, for stories like that today. One of the things that I admire you so much, and I wanted to do this interview, is the fact that you have published this book, Adin, when you were 82 years old. You're 84 now. So I think it's such a rare accomplishment. How did you get the idea of the Kurgan Tales?
Well, as you can tell, my name is very strange.
Yes, Uerkvitz.
Yes, it's just like alphabet soup where you take out whatever comes and put it together to make a name. Uerkvitz.
Right.
And there are not very many Uerkvitzes around. There are some in Ukraine, and some of them where my grandfather was born. They still are there, and they're scattered over Germany, but everybody knows that it is not a German name. The Witz part is meaning in Eastern Europe, a village.
I see.
So it's the Urk that has been the problem, the Uerk. So I had a specialist in tracing family names in San Diego, and asked him to trace it if he could. And he called me back about 2 weeks later, and he said that he and a friend of his had worked 200 hours on the first half of the name and gave up. And he wouldn't charge me anything for it. But he thought maybe it was Turkish or Finnish. So somebody told me that if it's Turkish or Finnish, it is probably Mongolian. So I thought for a while it was Mongolian. I finally decided I was going to send in my DNA to a company called Family Tree DNA.
Right.
And they did all of my maternal ancestry, or relationships, which I already knew through family history, through my mother's side, which was quite impressive, but that was not what I was interested in. I said, I want to know on my maternal side. About 2 weeks later, they said that we have related your DNA to the DNA of a body of a person that lived 5,000 years ago on the Central Asian steppe. And he was a member of a tribe they call Kurgans, and they were the first people to tame and ride horses.
Wow, that's an interesting fact.
And that really captivated my interest and got my attention.
It's a wonderful culmination of information. One thing led to another. You were curious about your family name, and that led to your DNA testing, and then you got the background on your family, and that led to the book.
Right.
But you started out with Adin just as one book, but now it is part of a trilogy. You've just published Explaining Wardia. You're busy writing the third one. When did it become a trilogy, and why?
By the time I was through doing the research for Adin, I was sure that when I wrote the book, I would be so tired of the steppe that I wouldn't want to hear about it again. But the characters just seemed to flow into each other and taking their own lives on their own, and entering my head from the subconscious, of course, imagining what could have happened if this had happened, and taking it. Of course, it was planned ahead, but I thought, I just can't stop here. I enjoyed writing so much. So I did Explaining Wardia, who is a very difficult person to explain, because she came from what we would say are the Assyrian, from the Assyrian tribe. And she had red hair and green eyes, and nobody had ever seen anything like her. And she attaches herself to Blow as a slave, and he can't get rid of her. And everywhere he goes, he has to explain her. but she can't be explained.
She can't be explained. Well, that sounds like a fascinating character. You've done a lot of research, and I must commend you. And this is well researched, well written. How do you do your research?
Well, actually, since I've done so much research, I don't include so much don't need to include so much historical stuff
As in the first one.
as in the first one.
I see.
And people who complain that there's almost too much research, too much history, they'd rather
Right.
read the story.
Right.
And people that read Wardia say they enjoy it more because it's more smooth and I give all the
Right,
explanations
right. I mean,
at the
I
beginning.
must admit, I also felt the second book, it was a smoother read because it was a lot of information in the first one. But I think you need that platform.
I wanted
you do
to
need it. Yes,
introduce the Kurgan culture.
Exactly,
Who has
yes.
ever heard of the Kurgans?
Exactly, not me.
Yeah.
And I feel now I do know them. You've portrayed it well. But I do, so I'm glad it's a trilogy now, and I'm looking forward to where the story is going to take you and us as the readers. And we would really certainly want to know more. I want to talk about the writing process. What makes you get up in the morning and write? You mentioned you enjoy writing.
Yes.
Right? But do you get up and say, today I'm going to write?
Yes, except
Okay.
that lately I haven't been able to do that because, well, nowadays you have to market your book.
Of course, yes.
And
There's
so there's that part which I don't enjoy so much. But the next one is more difficult to write because I have to tie 3 places together. The Scythians are defeated in a battle, and the remnant has to go find the other Scythians. And the Scythians, I call it the Scythian Manifesto. They feel that they must control the whole steppe. So I've got to get history into this. It's not just fantasy. I've got to get those Scythians out there and get the Kurgans out of the country.
Oh, is that they drove them out of the country in the end?
Well, they didn't kill them all
I see.
because I'm here.
There you are. That's very true. Wow.
And there was a migration of people from the steppes to Europe. And this book I did a lot of research in, as you can tell. The Kurgan culture and the Indo-Europeanization of Europe. Every language in Europe does have traces of the Kurgan language.
I see.
Sometimes now the archaeologists call them the bow tie people. The Kurgan was the burial mound, and the first person to discover them in about 1959 called them the Kurgans after the mounds, but it's really a Russian word. And I learned a lot from this book because no matter what language you speak, if it is based on a European language, you have traces of the Kurgan language and will be there forever.
It's almost like one language to rule them all.
Well, maybe not rule, but to
Or influence them all, or
influence
rather
them all,
use
yeah.
influence. Yes. So let's conclude the segment about the books. Challenges in the writing process. Do you find any challenges while you write?
Oh, yes, it's very challenging because it's all up to you.
Right. It's quite a solitary process, right?
Well, I'm used to that,
Are you?
practicing the piano, spending hours at
That's
the keyboard.
true, that's true.
So that's not a problem. My problem is remembering to get up. And after having been there for so long, I can hardly get up out of the chair.
Right. Oh, you mean getting up once you start writing? Well, that's good. So
Yeah.
you just keep writing,
I
writing,
just keep
writing.
writing and writing and writing
That's
until
fantastic.
I think, well, maybe I better get something to eat. But, and that's when it's going well. And I'm looking forward to finishing the third book, which has turned out to be very difficult because we've got the bow tie people
Right.
of one generation, and then we have the City of Red people,
Okay.
where Vlo is now, and we've got the Scythians that are bound determined that they will control
see.
the steppe, and the Scythians are particularly after these people. So it's not going to have a really happy ending.
Oh.
Because
Too bad.
the Scythians
Yeah.
control the steppe and more, clear until the fall of Rome.
Wow.
And Attila the Hun did the men.
Well, they got their comeuppance.
They sure did.
They sure did. You mentioned that, I never thought of that actually, but now that you mentioned it, I do see the comparison of writing and playing the piano, two very solitary ways of artistic expression. So would you say there is similarities in the way you creatively express yourself through those two mediums?
Well, if I were more electronically inclined, composing, I would enjoy very much.
Right.
But when I first tried it, I actually managed to know how to do it, but the software was not good enough to do the rhythmic complexities that I wanted to do. So this gives me a creative outlet. I think that my children trying to keep things to keep father out of mischief.
Right.
So they keep encouraging me to do these things.
Well, and I would say keep on writing, because I think it's remarkable that you've, over the age of 80, I wish I had half your energy and half your creativity. I think it's just great. So keep on writing, keep giving us more books.
Well, hopefully it'll keep Alzheimer's away.
They say it does. They say it does. Keep the brain busy. Exercise the brain gym. Right. Thank you, David.
Thank you.